All right, so today I'm going to show you how to program this stuff and make it do stuff. When you're dealing with the digital consoles, you have two strategies here. You can just do it right here with this interface that they give you. Most of them will have some sort of screen on them with some buttons that allows you to navigate it. Sometimes it'll be a touch screen, sometimes it won't. The touch screens are like way better. What? You disagree?
They're so finicky.
Well,
I mean, if it was a good touch screen.
yeah.
It would
I
be
just
better,
like
but
the touch screens that I have been using recently. You gotta like jam your thumb in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's different technology than like what's on your cell phone or your iPad.
Yeah.
So you can do that. They usually give you some kind of interface like that on the console, but in most cases they will also give you some kind of app, which I have the one for this console set up here, talking to it. I'm not going to get into how you get the app to talk to the console because that's a topic for another class, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. But you can, if you see, like I can. Move the faders on the console, and the app shows me that I'm doing it, in the app, right? And vice versa, I can also go to the app, and I can move it here, and it'll move in real life, right? So it kind of depends. I don't know that in this particular case, either of these options are better than any of the other ones, but I will try to show you the main strategy in both ways. So let me just kind of see if I can show you the screen here. So the first thing you're going to want to do, at least when you're doing your assignment and when you're starting off with the new digital console, is remember on the analog console we would go in and like zero everything out, and turn it like. You have to do that too, but it's a lot easier this way. So you're going to go to this little button here, which is where all the scene memories are. And this console has scene 0 is always what they call initial data, which is just sort of like default, settings that Yamaha decided they would put on there. And so then you push recall, and it just reset the whole console to the start, to default settings, okay?
What's the button?
It's recall. So I can also do it. I can also do it on the app. There's this scene memory thing, and this is the scene that I used last week, so I can get all those settings back, and now I've got meters and everything. But if I go back to scene 0 and hit recall, it zeroes everything out. You can see how many of the controls changed, right? So it's like
Scene 0?
scene.
Scene.
Call them scenes, not the scenes of a play. Okay. Most mixing consoles use that scene terminology. Some will call them snapshots. Mostly it's scenes. And by default, on this console, every scene stores every parameter of the mixer. Okay. Some mixing consoles will give you the ability to decide which parameters you're storing into that scene. So you're not storing everything, you're only storing the things that you want to have in there. This one doesn't let you do that. But what this console does do is it has some what they call recall safe parameters, which, let me see if I can pull that up. Okay, so this is a thing where it has all the controllable parameters of the console, and you can basically tell it to recall safe things. And recall safe means like protect this setting. Like I don't ever want this setting to be changed by recalling a scene. Like if I recall a scene and it has information for this particular parameter, don't change it. So, and some examples of like why you might want to do that are you know, if it's a really complicated show where you have a lot of scenes, or you're going moment to moment through the show and changing parameters, there's some things that you like definitely want to make sure don't change. Like, you always want to make sure like the God neck works, right? Just in case somebody has to call a hold or something. You don't ever want like some screw up that you made to like suddenly disable that thing. And so if that's working, you could recall save that thing. Just say, hey, listen, I never want this to change. Like, it's working now, don't ever change it. And you could recall save it so that no scene would ever modify that parameter. You could recall save like the system outputs, like if the system itself is working and all the outputs are doing what they're doing, you could recall save those, again, so it doesn't like disable your ability to like have sound come out of the system.
Are you saying save or safe?
Safe. Recall safe. So, you know, I can go in here and say, for example, never, you know, completely recall safe everything on this channel, on channel 12. And it'll do that. So, you know, I don't use that a whole lot. What I would prefer, and this is one of the reasons why I don't really like these Yamaha consoles a whole lot, is like I would prefer to have those parameters on a scene-by-scene basis. I much prefer what I call selective capture, which is where you tell the console what parameters you want to store in a scene. If you can't have that, then at least have selective recall on the scene, so you can say on this scene only recall these parameters and don't recall the others. And when you do it on a scene-by-scene basis rather than the global. The global can get you in trouble in some cases because you forget that you've saved things. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is we got to patch this thing. There are a couple ways to do it. If you're going to do it in the app here, you're going to go to the patch editor, and we want to go to the output patch. And what this is showing us is there are 16 analog outputs called the Omni outputs that are XLRs on the back of the console, okay? And then there are the 3 slot cards. So you can see there's the 3 slot outs, and then there's these other things, rack ins, which are like the effects racks. And there's a thing called the 2-track out, which is a set of analog outputs on the back of the console. So these are all the outputs you have available. We just need to decide what's going to be what. In our case, we're using the Omni outputs, which are, let me double check actually. Yeah, okay. So what we're doing is we have the Omni outs 15 and 16 of the console are going to our main left and right monitors here. So that's the first thing I'll patch. So I'll go in here and I'll say, all right, I want, oh look, it defaults to Omni 15 and 16 as the stereo left and stereo right. So I've got those patched. Now, then I also have 1, 2, 3, 4 monitors on the Omnis 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can put those on mix 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is what they default to. But I could change them if I wanted to. Like if I wanted it to be 5, 6, 7, 8, I could switch it and have bus 5, 6, 7, 8 be, feed outputs Omni out 1 through 4. All right. One thing I want you to notice is that you can have a single mix bus feeding multiple outputs. So that sound could come out of multiple places. It'll let you do that. So this is what it looks like to patch it in the software. Let me show you what that looks like on the touch screen. Let's see if I can let you see that. So on the touch screen here, You will go into, like here's our main stereo out. So it's these channels here, and you click on this little spot here, and this is where your patch is. Let's see if I can zoom that in at all. Maybe. Come on. Is that as much as it goes?
And at this point, everyone on YouTube all froze up and used it.
That's a little bit better. All right. So I went into the stereo channels and I clicked this little spot here, which is where the patch is. And right now it says output patch, and right now it's Omni 15 and 16. But if you click on that, it opens up, here's all of your possible outputs. So this is Omni 1 through 16. And you just pick which one you want. So I could switch it to Omni 14 if I want. And now it's actually doing both. I can take it off, but that's where you do that here. It's up to you whether you do it here or on the app. Same thing for the mix buses. You pull up mix 1 through 8 on the central logic thing here, and then you can see what they're patched to, which says Omni 1 through 8. If you want to change that, you just click on that Omni 1, and you can select something different, okay? Now, in our case, we're using an input card that, let me make sure that I've got that right. Yeah, slot 2. Okay, so this computer that's playing our tracks right now is actually playing it through a digital connection called Dante. Okay, and Dante is a multi-channel audio protocol that runs on a computer network. Okay, so I've got a Cat6 cable patched between this computer and the Dante card in slot 2 of this console. So I've just got a single cable, and that can run, the card can take up to 16 inputs on that computer.
Can you say what you described Dante as again? A multi-channel.
Multi-channel, digital audio protocol that runs on a computer.
Okay.
Wired. Dante does not work wirelessly. Not officially, anyway. It's one of a handful of protocols that do that same thing. So like AVB is an example of that. Again, runs multi-channel audio on a computer. Sound systems these days are just big computer networks. And I end up pretty regularly having conversations with our IT department about that because they get really worried when I buy things like network switches. Well, because they think I'm going to break the school network, because I'm going to plug the switch into the network and it's going to wreak havoc. And I say, no, this is never going to connect to the school network. It's going to connect to the sound systems. And they're like, why are the sound systems connecting to a network? Because the sound system is the network. It's just one big network. Okay. So that's the reality these days. By the way, just note to self. Note to self: to be a really effective sound person these days, you kind of need to have the computer networking skills of an IT professional. So if that is not something that you know a lot about, if you don't really know a lot about computer networks and switches and IP addresses and the way computers talk to each other, I will teach you some of that kind of stuff in some of the classes, but you might want to study on your own a little bit, because it really is. The sound systems are just big computer networks, complicated computer networks. Yes.
What might be good resources to do that?
There's tons of things out there right now for that.
Okay.
Well, sometimes you're don't use YouTube because everyone
Well, the sound information on YouTube is not awesome.
Is the Indeed, because I know Indeed has the like job learning certificates. Is that like a reliable source too?
Could be. Like if you do the Dante level 3 certification, it gets pretty deep into network protocols and how that stuff works. And you're going to think that, oh, this is really mind-numbing, I don't need to know this. It's like, no, you do. You have to understand that stuff. So anyway, so right now, this computer is playing the sound through a Dante system. So I've got this little tiny, I actually have 2 computer networks going right now on the console. One is the Dante network, which is doing the audio from the computer to the console, and then I've got a control network going, which is letting the computer, this computer, and the console, and my laptop all talk to each other. That's a control network. So I've got 2 separate networks going on here right now. So what I've got to do is if I want my inputs to work, I have to patch them. Because by default, in that initial data scene that the M7CL has, it just patches the Omni inputs, or just the analog inputs, of which there are 32 on the Yamaha M7CL 32 channel. It just patches 1-to-1, you know, XLR analog input 1 goes to channel 1 of the console, analog XLR input number 2 goes to channel 2 of the console. That does that by default. In our case, we need to do something slightly different. So we need to go over here to the slots, and I know that I've got my Dante card plugged into slot 2. Now, Dante did not exist when this mixing console was invented. And so this console does not know that there is a Dante card in slot 2. It doesn't know that, and therefore it's not going to tell you. You have to know that yourself because you put the card in that slot, or you look on the back of the console to see what is in that slot, right? But the mixer does not know what is in that slot. It doesn't even necessarily know that there is something in that slot. It'll let you patch it even if it's empty. So you have to know that. Now I happen to know that there is a Dante card in slot 2. Why? Because I put it there. And I connected a cable to it. So I know it exists. So I'm going to go ahead and patch it. So I'm going to go slot 2, channels 1, and I'm going to put that to input 1. And I'm going to put Dante slot 2 to input 2, channel 2 on the console, so on and so forth. What you might notice is as I'm doing this, you'll see the meters start popping up over there on the console, right? Because I'm patching actual audio signals into them now. This is like picking up a cable and plugging it in, to the output of one device to the input of another device. I'm just doing it instead of with a cable, I'm doing it with computer code. Because remember, digital consoles, it's just a computer, and everything is an abstraction of something that would normally be real in analog world. It's now just something pretending to be that thing. So this patch editor is pretending to be a patch bit, where you patch cables, connector to connector. It's just pretending to be that. It's not actually that. It's just a bunch of computer code with an abstraction of a patch bay. So I'm just going to click in these cross points and get all these in here. There you go. And then I also have this mic plugged in. I don't remember what input we plugged that into. Let's see. Input 1. Okay. So we have this microphone plugged into input 1, analog input 1. So I'm going to go over here, and so here is analog input 1. I want that to show up on channel 9 of the console, because I've already used 1 through 8. Okay. So now this mic will show up there. Now let's pull up channel 9 over here. So here's channels 1 through 16 of the mixer. And let's pull up our meters. You can see that I've got signal on inputs 1 through 8. right? Now, do I have signal on input 9? No. What if I hit this? No. Okay, why? I think, what's that? Oh, that's a good question. Let's see, it does have a switch. Ooh, I can barely get something. So it was switched off. Good call, Brooke.
That'll do it.
So I've got just a little tiny bit of signal. Well, I'm really hitting this thing hard. I feel like I should be getting more signal from that, right? No, if it needed phantom power, we wouldn't see anything at all. I have to really smack it to get anything at all. So what's going on here? Yeah, I gotta turn up the gain. So here is, there's a couple ways to do this. You can do it right here, or you can pull up this window that is the selected channel main view. And if I go over and I hit the select button for channel 9, oh, it's not tracking. Okay. Well, I'll click it over here. I'll hit select over here. And now this is all of the settings for input channel 9. Okay? And there's this thing called HA.
Is that gain?
So in the analog world, that knob that's called gain controls a circuit called a preamplifier or a preamp. Okay? Yamaha calls it a head amp on these consoles. Why? Because it actually is two things. There is a preamplifier in there, but there's also a line level amplifier as well. And because remember how, when you do line level sources on an analog console, you gotta do a pad to pad it down to mic level, or you use a separate input. Well, they've just got one input on this thing, and they're trying to capture the entire possible range that you could have from a microphone all the way up to a really loud line level device. And the way they do that, as far as I understand, is there's actually two things in there. One that handles the mic level stuff and one that handles the line level stuff. But there's no button that switches between them. There's no pad button on here. Instead, it's an auto-ranging thing. And if you listen really carefully, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna turn this up, and we'll see if we can hear it. You'll hear. I'll take this up to a certain point, and you're gonna hear a little click. Did you hear it? Okay. What happened is there's a relay in there. And a relay is a remote control switch. It's a switch that can be switched remotely in an electrical circuit. And so when I took that head amp gain to a certain point, it goes, oh, we're really going hot here. We must be dealing with a microphone level signal. And so it flipped the relay over to the preamplifier. And when it was in the lower setting, it was going through the line level amplifier. So this is pretending to be one thing, it's actually two things. And so Yamaha, in an effort to, I guess not deceive us, they're saying, well, we're going to call it a head amp. Because it's not technically just a preamp, because you can do line level or mic level through this thing, and it will figure out on its own which of those two circuits it needs to use. So I can keep turning this up now that I've got it. And let's see let's see how hey, now I got some good signal. Check. Yeah, all right. See how that works? All right, so we've got our inputs patched. Let's figure out how we're going to deal with our buses. Okay. Now, I showed you last week how you do this on the touch screen, but just as a reminder, I'll show you again. So you click the little setup button here, and then there's this little thing called bus setup. And this gives you your 16 mixes, as they call it. And the mixes can be stereo or mono, and they can be fixed, variable pre-fader, or variable pre-EQ. In our case, we are going to use these first 4 mix buses as aux sends for our 4 monitors, right? So we want them to be variable, because variable is Yamaha code for aux, okay? And just for funsies, I'm going to turn the rest of, well, let's see, because we might want to have a couple for an effects routing. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will be variable. Okay? Because we'll have 4 of them will be aux sends, and the other 2 will go into the reverb effects if we want to do that. So then 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, I'll set to be groups, which we might use as subgroups, we may not. It's up to us. We can, they're quite happy to do that. So now you're good to go. You can close that. To do it in the app, you pull this up, and let's see, where is the place where that is done? Oh, I think it's over here in mixer setup. Yeah. Okay, so here's your 16 mix. Oh, sorry. So I got to it over here, going to File, Mixer Setup. And here they are. So here's where you can set it to pre-EQ, pre-fader, or fixed. And I've got the first 6 set to variable pre-fader, the rest set to fixed. And it's got matrix, which we'll talk about. We don't need to worry about matrix right now. Now, in the interface here, you'll see what happens now is, so these first 6 now have like knobs that actually do something, but these knobs don't work. Like you can click on them, but they don't work. Why? Because we turned these into fixed buses, which means they're functioning like groups, and groups don't have knobs. Groups just have buttons. So to route it into there, you just hit on and it goes in there. Okay? All right, so we can now go in and name these things. So I'll call this one my kick drum. It even has like, hang on, it has like built-in icons, so I can say kick and it'll show you a picture of it, right? Let me do that here, actually. I'll do a kick. This will be snare. And then this third one was like cymbals, right?
Yes.
So, do that. So I'll call this one the snare. This is the other cool thing about mixers, is you can label things without you having to use tape. All right, so if we look at these are all automatically routed to the stereo outputs. You see, that's what these buttons are, is this routes to the stereo, either on or off. So they're already routed. And if I pull the stereo fader up, I should be able to start hearing these just to remind myself what they are. Like, okay, number 1 is the kick drum. Okay, 2 is the snare. That's the cymbals. Okay, that's the keyboard. So I can also, well, I'll show you. So I'm right-clicking on here, and I'll call this keyboard. Use keyboard icon for it anyway. I'll call this keys. What did we decide? This was low or high?
This was
Okay. He's high. Okay. That was the bass. E bass. Okay, and I put 7. His acoustic guitar. So they never really give you a whole lot of space to put these labels, so you always end up having to truncate things or abbreviate them. All right, this is going to be our electric guitar. And then number 9 is our mic. Could like, I'll just tell the mic. All right, so we sort of have something now. Yep. I can even do my mic.
Hello.
Right? I did it. Right? No big whoop, right? Easy. Easy. So just so, I've done a lot of work here already, and I don't want to lose that because, it's just a computer, and even though computers are good at remembering things, you have to tell them to remember things. If you don't tell them to the computer to remember it, it's not going to assume that you want it to remember that. So I will say, let's go ahead and remember this. And I'm going to navigate to a snapshot here. And I'll go to snapshot 1, and I'll hit store. It says store to scene memory 1. Yes. There you go. And I'm going to name this thing. So go to my scene memories, and let's see. This one I'm going to call class demo, Jason's demo of programming. You can see there's some other scenes in here, which I can just, from previous things, I can just clear those out. Okay, sure, why not? No, I don't need to do that right now. Okay, clear.
Jason, when was the last time your board was called for a show?
Oh, I don't know. It's been a little while.
Would you allow someone to use this? Or would it be one of those boards where you're like, I hate this board, never use it?
I don't hate this board, but
There are better options.
yeah, I mean, there's better options out there. I mean, as much as I make fun of this console, it is reliable. Missing consoles prior to this model were not reliable.
You mean like it won't crash? or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, it's pretty stable.
It won't get struck by lightning and take down your show in the middle of it.
I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but this thing is pretty solid. If something goes wrong, it's usually because of something you did. This doesn't really, it's not super flaky. So in that sense, I like it. The other thing I like about it is it's a great console to start on, aside from the weird terminology problems that it has, because it is basically a fixed format console. Like, it only took me 10 minutes to get this thing up and running. Because you turn it on and it's already a mixer that already does stuff. You don't have to tell it a whole lot of things in order to get it to do something. In fact, if I was just using the analog inputs, I wouldn't even have to do all that input patching. I could have just plugged in and gone. But so that's one nice thing about this console, is because it's a fixed format console, meaning the number of inputs and the number of output buses, everything is a fixed thing. Like, you can't change that. It just, it's easy to get up and running really quickly. So if you're just starting out learning digital consoles, this is not a bad one to learn, because you don't have to do a whole lot to get it to work. Okay, so I wouldn't mind if people used it on a show. We do have a 48-channel version of this too in the shop. It's the same thing, just more channels. So whatever. Okay, so let's see. What else might I want to do? Oh, let's do some reverb. So I'm going to go to the rack here, and so here's the rack, the effects rack, okay? And it's given me 4 things by default here. Now I want to patch this differently because it's got mix 13 feeding the first rack, and I want to do that off of mix 5, right? Because I did 1 through 4 as auxes, and then 5 and 6 I said I would use for effects. So I'm going to say, this should be fed off of mix 5, and then it's going to come back on stereo in left, which is stereo 1 left and right. Stereo 1, yeah, this one here. So we can look at this and see what it is. It's some kind of like hall reverb. Ooh, really long reverb time. Let's calm that down a little bit. Okay, so that should work. So if I have my mic here, I'm going to say, send some of this into mix 5, and then make sure that I've got mix 5 turned up on the faders, right? Which there it is, and then that should come back here on stereo 1. Let's see if I get anything. Oh yeah. So this is dry, and now this is with the reverb. Okay? So super cool. I don't have to go get something off the shelf, rack it up, match with the cables. It's in there. There's a little program that pretends to be a reverb. These have what's called a pre-post button that it always just says pre. And it's just a question of whether you have the pre turned on or off. So right now, like these ones are turned on, the pre is lit up, meaning these are pre-fade send auxes, and the pre is turned off on this one, meaning they're functioning as post-fade. If I set this to pre-fade, then even if I put the fader down here, I'd still get the reverb, right? But if I turn off the pre-fade, now I don't get anything, right? Unless the fader's up, and then I get both. Right? Just like on the analog console. All right. Well, what if I wanted to route some of my monitors? Well, let's go in and label them first. So we could go in, we go overview mix. Here's all of our mixes. And what is, for our assignment, what is mix 1? What is aux 1?
Aux 1 was the drums monitor.
Drum mon. Okay. And then 2 would be keys mon. 3 would be bass mon. 4 would be guitar mon. Okay. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can, if I want to route something into that aux 1, let me switch to the camera so you can see what happens here. Oops, hang on. I might actually have to zoom out for this, for you to get the full effect. Okay, so I'm going to select aux 1, which is my drum monitor. And then if I click this button up here that says sends on fader, it pulls this thing up here, and I want to do the drum monitor, so I hit that, and now this is all the send levels into the drum monitor. So I can just go and mix the drum monitor.
That's so good.
So I don't remember what the drummer said they wanted, but let's say it was that. Okay? And then I'll just mute that output for a minute, and let's go to the keys monitor. Okay, now I've got this, so the keys probably wants themselves, a bit of drums. Right? So I can mute that. We'll go to the bass monitor, and right? So you can do each one. just mix it. Everybody's got their little monitor mix there. And then you can turn off the sense on fader and you go back to the inputs, right? That's like the fast way to do it. You can also go in to each input, and if you pull it up over here, you can see here are all the send levels, right? So there's how much of number 1 I put in, and you can go in and turn the knob for each one, right? Of how much of each channel you're sending into number 1. So you can do that way. You can also use these knobs over here, do the same thing. So you can adjust 2, 3, 4, just like you would on an analog console. And if you can also go in here, and if you pull up, let me pull it up on the app. So if I do the selected channel again, you can go in here and adjust it like this, right, on each input. And I don't remember if, I don't think is there a sends on fader? Oh yeah, here it is. So here's the sends on fader function for this thing. So I can go in and say, all right, here's the drum monitor. These are all the sends to the drum monitor, which, if they want more electric guitar, there's the keys monitor, so on and so forth. So that functionality is repeated on the app. What else? What else do I need to show you?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is that feature of utilizing the faders to set the axis on pretty much all digital chords now?
Yeah, so that's a pretty common feature.
Is that why people have gotten confused about axes and groups beyond just calling mixes on the or
I mean, maybe.
like it just appears?
Well, because if you do the sends on fader, like let's do the sends on fader again, and let's do it to a group. Okay, the faders just pop up, but I can assign each channel like this, right? Right, so that's a sends on fader for just assigning to it if it's a group. So it still works for group assignments, just you're hitting a button, right? But it could be, yeah. I mean, that could be very, very much part of the reason why people get confused. So just keep your wits about you on that. Charlie?
You asked before what else to show you. The subs for when we put the drums onto one group.
Subgroups. You can do that. So, all right. So here's my groups. Now let's say I want this one to be a drums subgroup. So I'll call this drums. This is, mix 13. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to route that to stereo by clicking that stereo button. So I'm going to route that group to stereo. If I pull it up here, it's this one. So let me get rid of these ones I'm not using. So this will be my drums, okay? And it's routed to stereo. And so all I got to do now is in my inputs, I just unroute the drum tracks from that. And then I could do, if I want to do the sends on fader, I could do the sends on fader to mix to the drums and assign these 3 channels to it. And now that functions as a subgroup now. So I bring these up. Right? Yeah. So I can have everything going, but I'm controlling the drums as a subgroup. So the groups, when you put them in, and this will be true even of the auxes, because they're just variable mix buses. You can route them to stereo as well, which maybe not the best idea, but it will let you do it. It will let you route what a variable mix bus that's functioning like an aux. It will let you route an aux to the main. Not sure why you don't want to do that, but you can. It'll let you. Remember, it's just a computer. It has no opinion. There's no agenda. It's not going to tell you that you're doing something dumb. If you ask it to do it, and it knows how to do that thing, it'll just do it.
Will you have the same problem? I assume the answer is no. Will you have the same problem on the analog console with like it clipping because it's warmer because it's being used more or whatever? Like it'll change based on.
I mean, like the unpredictability a little bit of the preamp.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like when I did it, my levels I needed to turn them down because the console was warmer.
Yeah, sometimes the head amp is the only analog part of this console. So even though you're controlling that digitally with that digital knob, it is controlling an analog circuit. So yeah, it has kind of a slight flakiness of an analog circuit. Maybe not quite as unpredictable as that one was, but potentially. The other thing, but an interesting thing you might find with this is that the clip indicators work a little bit differently on these things. Let me see if I can show you. They're not quite as deceptive. Let's see if, it won't act, because this is a digital input, it won't let me actually do it, but, well, I might. Let me see if I can I do a trim on it? No, it's not tracking. Stupid. Okay. No, there's not a digital trim. I can do it here. So let's bring this kick drum up. Oh, that's right. I've got it on a thing. Okay. So let me go into here, and I'll overdrive this. Okay, you see that meter? The digital meters are often a bit more accurate, like they're not tricking you. When the light comes on, it probably really is clipping in a lot of cases.
So it's just
Not always. Sometimes they still trick you, but on this one, it's pretty close. So something to watch out for there. Other questions? Yeah, Sam?
If the preamp is still an analog thing on a digital mixer, why does like clipping on a digital thing sound different than like on an analog stuff?
Well, because after the converter, the analog to digital converter that takes that analog signal coming off that preamp and then encodes it into math or numbers, it has a limit to like how high of a voltage it can encode into something, and it's possible to crank that preamp so it's outputting something higher than the limit of the converter. So when you clip the converter, that's what's happening, is you hear that distortion. There is an interesting little thing about digital though, which is that the chips, well, the chips that are actually doing the processing are either 32-bit or 64-bit chips, which means once you get it converted to digital, all the math you're doing on it after that is either 32-bit or 64-bit math, depending on what sort of processor it has. And that's a lot of bits, which means your dynamic range is in the processing domain is huge. And even though what can happen, and this manifests itself mostly in things like Logic or Pro Tools, but it can also happen in the digital consoles where it'll show you that it's clipping like on an aux or something, but what that really means, it's not technically clipping yet because it hasn't been converted back to analog. It's just saying that if you converted it to analog in its current state, it would clip. But it hasn't actually clipped because you're processing at 32-bit, and 32-bit has way bigger range than the converter does. And so you could have a bus clipping, and if you turn down the output, even though the bus is still registering a clip, it won't sound distorted because it didn't technically clip. It's a very weird thing. It's because it's doing that 32 or 64-bit math that really doesn't allow it, because it's just math, it's just numbers. It can't clip a number, right? It only turns into a clip when that number gets translated back into voltage, and if that voltage is higher than the converter that goes from digital to analog, then it'll clip. But it doesn't technically clip until it comes back on analog. So it's this weird thing that when you're working with digital systems, sometimes, especially on like buses and stuff, or processing, like a compressor or something, it'll make you think it's clipping. It'll say clipping, but you don't hear a clip, and that's why. Other questions?
Is this format that we're looking at now generally something at any point should I be like happy becoming familiar with the format?
What form?
Like the format of
Like this app?
Yeah. Because like is it something the way things are laid out genuinely going to progress that way in the digital boards? Or is this what I'm getting at really is the way that it looks right now because they were trying to accommodate for creating a transition between analog to digital?
I don't know. I mean, there's no standard for like what these control apps look like. Every one of them looks different and works differently.
Do you want us to download that for the assignment?
No, because it won't work on a new computer. I've got this old computer here, and I'll leave it so that you can use this if you want. But what you want to do, and this is the next step, is maybe have a little USB drive, because I think I left mine in.
I literally lost mine yesterday.
A little thumb drive or something? Because I want to show you what you're going to do. Because for the assignment, I want you to like put all the settings in, store a scene. So I'm gonna store my scene again, and then you want to like save it onto one of these. So you have the file. Now you can do it through the app, but I want to show you how to do it on the console too. So there's a little USB port here on the side. You stick this in, and when you stick it in, it automatically pulls up this save load screen. What's that?
Can you zoom in on the screen?
Let's see. Is that better? Okay, so it pulls up this save load screen and it says, oh, look, here's this drive. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and save. Now, you could, I'm not going to do this to Brooks Drive, but you could actually hit this format button and it would like wipe it, right? And make it like totally happy with Yamaha, but we're not going to do that. No, I don't want to do that. So you're going to hit save, and it'll say, what do you want to call this? And I'll just call this demo, and I'll hit save, and it put it in there. And what you'll see now is there's now a file here called demo.m7c. Okay? And so at this point, you could take this out, close that, take this out. Now the show's on here. Okay? So that guy that bailed me out in Chicago, that's what he was doing. He would now, every time I would walk away, he would like go in there and like stick it in and like save it and then stick that back in his pocket and walk away, right? It's a good idea to have a copy of the show not sitting on the console, right? It's not a backup unless it's sitting in a different place. So having it sitting on a little stick like this is really useful. If the thing blows up or crashes or something and loses all of its thing, then you can like take it in and you pull it, you stick it in, you load it, and it loads the whole thing, including all the scenes and all the settings and all that. That's what I want you to do for the project. Is I want you to save the file onto a little USB drive like this, and for the project, I'm gonna wipe the console in between everything, and then you're gonna walk up, you're gonna stick your little thing in, you're gonna load your file, and we're gonna see if it works. So it'll be really quick. Like, you know, if you've done it, like you just stick this in, you load the file, and it should work immediately. Right?
So it'll go way faster than the analog.
Should.
Theoretically.
Yeah. So practice that. It's part of the assignment.
I don't have one of those. Is there anything in particular about them?
It's just you can share them. Like if you don't have your own. You can just you can have more than one file on it. And, like if you want to get a buddy that has one, they're also cheap. I mean,
They're not that cheap. They're like $20. Oh.
yeah, but it doesn't even. This one doesn't need to be big. Like
Yeah,
it could be really
what's
small.
the minimum storage?
On this one, I mean, like
Don't look at me like I'm crazy.
it's old. Like it'll talk to like a really old thumb drive. Like you might have one like that you're laying around somewhere that's like a 16 megabyte one or something.
There might be a couple
That'll work
just
just
in
fine.
this shop.
Yeah, sure.
Are we just doing the exact same assignment just with this? Okay.
Yep. So I need to update the
Yeah, it's not on there.
I haven't published it yet. I'll do that right away in
Get
class
on
here. That's it. You're gonna basically do the same thing that you did before, but you're gonna do it on the digital console. Okay? And you're gonna save the file to a little USB thing, and then you're gonna walk up, you're gonna stick your thing in, you're gonna load that show, and it's gonna work. Okay? And that's it. And that's one of the cool things. Now, by the way, just as a little gee whiz thing,
Gee whiz.
these apps, these control apps, most of them will work even when they're not connected to the console. Which means you can have the app for the console on your computer, and you can program the console ahead of time before you ever even get the real thing. And you can make the whole file, you save it to a thing on your computer, and then you take it over to the real console, pull it up, and it could work.
It's like the digital version of the sheet.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just curious. You said it doesn't have to be on the same Wi-Fi, but and maybe because it's a different board, but for back to our board, I forget what we have, but the board that we had, I had to connect my computer to the router Wi-Fi board, whatever it was called, so that I could use that on my laptop.
Yeah.
Or just do it.
No, I do. So this computer is plugged, or this console is plugged in to this router, as is this computer, as is my computer. Right, all are plugged into the same one.
But you're saying you could do the app away.
Oh, yeah. So you just put it in. So you can launch that app, and you can put it into what's called offline editor, right? And you can it'll pretend like it's connected, and you can put all the settings in. Like I'm doing that right now for a wild party. I was doing it this morning. I had the D-Light app up, and I was things out. And what I want to do is, I think it'd be really fun. Maybe by Thursday, when I know that like Emma and Charlie and Ken are going in, I really want to send you a file and let you try to load it and email it to you, and let you put it on the thumb drive, and I want you to load it on the console and see what happens.
What does that mean? See what
Send us
happens.
malware.
See if it works. Like
You send us a
Oh my god. He would. It's your birthday.
Jason would send us a virus.
God.
And he'd be
Send
like,
you a virus.
But
Alright,
I've
I'll fix it.
he's
No.
like, oh yes, I've completely rigged
But I've done that
the
before.
console,
Like if
fixing
I've got a
it.
show I'm doing and I'm not going to be there for another week that they're setting up or whatever, like I'll send them a file ahead of time. Like, hey, here I pre-programmed the board. Just plug this in. And then load it up. That's super slick.
If you do it right,
Well, yeah.
like
But,
you really have to know the interface of the app.
well, yeah. I think the thing the trick to this is remembering that every digital console is just pretending to be an analog console. Okay? And so we haven't yet gotten to the place where the interface has not changed really much. All of these digital consoles are just like giving you an interface that is some abstraction of an analog interface. So if you understand the concepts of inputs, outputs, auxes, groups, routing, mixing, like faders, buttons, knobs, like that paradigm is not changed really at all. So regardless of like how they present it in the app, like that information is still the same on the console. You just have to kind of understand, like, okay, where do they show me the input figures? Where do they show me the outputs? Where do they show me the buses? Where do they show me the mixer apps? Where do they show me, but how do I get the auxes? Like, it's all the same. You just have to figure out where they're hiding the information, but it's all in it. And every console will have that. Okay. Other questions? No? All right. Well, that's the idea. I'm going to go ahead and reset this thing. Yep. I'm gonna, let's see. Go back and recall. I'm gonna set it back to the default. So that's what you should do. Before you start, recall that zero, that scene 0, and then you'll be able to start from scratch. I want to delete this one now. How do I delete this one? I don't remember. I know I did it in the app. Okay. Alrighty. Everybody understand what your task is?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right. Well, that's all you gotta do. Next week we'll load these up and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure out why. Okay.
Fair enough. It's gonna work though.
Should work. I mean,
we've done this before. Should
yeah.
work.
Just remember, it's just a computer. And computers do what you tell them to do, not what you want them to do. We don't have, we don't have the Neuralink thing working yet, where your brain is actually wired directly into the computer. People are working on that. Like, that's going to happen.
That sounds so dangerous.
Killing monkeys.
Yeah.
Every time they put it in, the monkey just collapses and
Yeah.
dies.
But like, that's the thing. People are working on that. But we're not there yet. So like, the computer has no way of knowing what you want it to do just because you thought of it. You have to explicitly tell it. So if it's not doing what you want, it's probably because you didn't tell it to do it the way you want it to. You gotta tell it. Just remember that. You gotta tell it everything. Okay?
That's what makes me worried about the app. I just feel like if I got too comfortable with the app, then when I start to interface with the board, like, if something went wrong and I needed to get things quickly.
And some manufacturers have different philosophies on that. Like Yamaha, like their app looks nothing like the interface on the touchscreen of the console.
It's dangerous.
But others, it looks exactly the same. And I don't know if I like that, because if the app on the computer is just a port of the app that's running on the console, then I feel like you're missing an opportunity there. Well, because you got this big computer screen that could show you more information all at once. And if they're constraining themselves to that tiny touchscreen interface that's on the console, then like, why am I doing it on the computer? I could just do it on the console, right? So I think there's a happy medium there of like getting the benefits of having more screen real estate to let you see more and do more, but not dramatically change the interface so much that you don't recognize the console when you stand in front of the real thing. It's a tricky thing that every manufacturer has to wrestle with. Yamaha clearly kind of just chose to go way on the other side. Like, we're not going to make it look like the real thing at all. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. It's just, it is what it is. All right. Any other questions?
For the head amp, when you start to turn up the gain on like the line inputs,
Yeah.
do we need to watch out for when it clicks? Okay.
I just was letting you listen so you would like hear that actually there's a relay that's firing. I don't know what happens when those relays get stuck. That hasn't happened yet, but eventually no relay works forever. So far, I've not ever experienced one going out. Someday it will.
I guess it's possible, yeah.
You just hop over the top and replace it.
Yeah, it'd be a soldering thing. I'll solder it from the new one.
I had a relay break in my car. That was fun. I didn't
Yeah.
know which one it was, so I had to like get.
I've had like, you know, I've had the actual output amplifiers or input preamps and stuff go down. Those chips have gone down. Like we had, we lost some output line drivers on our Digico several years back, and we had to crack those open and, you know, replace those.
You don't send it in. You go.
No, I still don't myself.
But like, then you can't ask them for help anymore, right?
Well, no, I asked them for the chips.
Yeah, but you
It's
just
not
said
like Apple Care or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I called Titus at Digico, and I was like, hey, I think I've got 2 outputs dead. He's like, oh yeah, I'll send you the chips. So he just sent me 2, you know, a few. I've still got a couple in my office, and you can just take them. Like, I didn't even have to solder. So I had to take console apart. I had to replace a couple faders on our Digico too, because the motors on the faders will someday not motor anymore. Those motors will die, and you got to replace the fader. That's the thing.
This isn't really related to the console specifically, but how do faders work mechanically? Like, how does the console know where it is? Am I making sense? Oh my gosh.
So in the analog world, the fader is basically an attenuator. So it's just a resistor. It's a variable resistor. Okay? And the reason that 0 is towards the top is that's basically no resistance, right? No attenuation. The audio is being allowed to pass through unaffected. And as you pull down, you're adding resistance. Okay? And so it's reducing and reducing and reducing the amplitude of the signal until you take it all the way to the bottom, and the bottom is always labeled with the infinity sign because it's like infinitely attenuated. Okay? Whereas all the way up at 0 is, we call that unity gain or unity, which is no change. And some faders give you they have the ability to do a little bit of amplification, about 10 dB boost beyond unity. But on an analog world, that's what it is. Now in the digital world, the audio is not really passing through the fader. So the fader is just an encoder that's hooked up to a digital input, and it just reads that voltage change on the fader and turns that into a digital number that it uses to do math. But that little circuit that translates the voltage into digital works the other way too. So the computer can send that thing to digital number, and we'll go, oh, that means this voltage. It hits that, and the fader pops up to where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Also, I know in our labeling one time we were talking about how it was crystallized in memory or something with our subscriptions done. Do we have a new website for
Kind of. We're switching over. We're switching back to local hosting solutions that I'm working with IT on, and as of yesterday, it works. And at least I tested it and it worked. But IT is currently enabling the student access to it. So they turned that on today. I haven't tested it yet though. So I'll get somebody to sit down with me and test it, and then we'll see how the read-only access works. And once we can verify that it all works, then we'll send it out to you guys. All right. Anything else? All right. I'm going to stop the video, and then I will